Is yours truly, Shamika Dean. Listen, y'all, come on in as you are tuning in. Y'all know what to do. Listen, share, invite others to join and watch this broadcast because we are back for part three of the Surrender Over Strategy series. And so, part one, I talked about how to surrender in your personal life and how it is going to actually supernaturally accelerate your growth, your healing, your development in your personal life, which starts with surrendering your way, your will for God's, your way for God's will for your life, and aligning what you're doing in the season with your God given purpose, destiny, and your assignment. So that means being in alignment with what God has told you to do, how He's told you to do it, and who He has told you to serve. Part two, I talked about how surrender is your supernatural success accelerator for your profit. So, for those of you all who are in business, who are entrepreneurs, experts, I talked about how surrendering your is going to help you grow in your business, which I talked about removing yourself as the bottleneck in your business. I talked about aligning your offer with your catalyst client, not your comfort client. I talked about restructuring and building your business model in a way that gives you the opportunity to be both present in your family and continuing to exceed your revenue goals in your business. And so today I'm going to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is marriage. How surrender is a supernatural strategy to actually transform your marriage. And so that is what we're talking about today. So, first and foremost, as I said on the other broadcast, oftentimes when we think about surrender as something negative, as a means of just giving up and quitting. But surrender is actually a supernatural position and posture. It's posturing your heart and your position, your profit, all of these things to the leading and guidance of God. That is the ultimate understanding, or my understanding of of surrender. And surrender is moving yourself out of the place of constant striving, of constant straining and struggling, trying to figure things out, putting yourself in a position where you have become the source instead of allowing God to show you where your resources are going to come from, and remembering that God is the source, right? And so I want to talk about this in the state of marriage, because if you are a strong woman, a powerhouse woman, if you are a woman who has been labeled as, alpha femme or any of those things, this means that you are a woman who is have a woman who can think for herself, a woman who is often in a position of leadership or authority in some particular area of her life, and you are a woman who knows what she wants and knows how to get out there and get it, right? And so when you enter into a marriage, and you hear words like submit can sound like such a dirty word. It can sound like an ugly word. It can sound like a no, this ain't gonna happen kind of word, right? But I believe that that is partially because submission has been erroneously taught. It has been taught as a a way of demeaning or belittling or removing your identity, purpose, and all of those things as a woman. But you had a purpose before God ever gave you a husband. You had a purpose for which you were created that was beyond you being a wife, a mother, or any of those things. And those things do not end when you say I do, right? Your individuality does not end when you say I do. Those things don't just go out of the window once you are married. And so, however, when it comes to being in a marriage, the goal for marriage is for us to, number one, become one, right? A husband and wife to become one. And again, this doesn't mean that you forget about who you are, what you're called to do, but it is about coming together for a common vision, for the mission, the mandate, and the mantle that is on your marriage. So I believe that every marriage has a mission. I believe that each person has every marriage has a mission, has a mandate, and each individual person, the husband and the wife in the marriage, also have their own mantle that they are called to operate in. And so when you bring those two together, you are actually called to come together because there are skills, gifts, strategies, insights, wisdoms, experience that when you guys come together, you are such a powerful force and you are fulfilling that mission and the mandate for your marriage. And so first of all, understanding what that mandate in marriage is, that mandate and mission is so vitally important. And most people go into the marriage and they have absolutely no idea what that even looks like. What is the purpose for us even being married? And so a lot of us go into marriage and we think that marriage is just about us, right? So that we, better to marry than to burn, so that we're not out here, just loose as a goose, right? So that we are finding love, someone to love us unconditionally, us completely, love us unconditionally, and all of those things. However, when God puts something together, there is a specific purpose for that. And so that could be to change the legacy of poverty to a legacy of wealth in your family. That could be to change a legacy of brokenness to create a legacy of wholeness. That could be to end the legacy of single parent households. That could be it. There could be so many different things, but it's important for you to understand what that is so that you know how to operate. Now, how does surrender come into play? Surrender comes into play because as much as we love our spouses, as much as we love our husband, as much as we love our wives, right? The reality is we are so different in how we are made. And oftentimes when differences come up in a relationship, in a marriage, what often happens is the differences are seen as a way to cause divide, right? To bring in disconnect. But differences in a marriage are actually the key ingredients to a successful marriage. But what happens is when you don't see it that way, you don't understand it, every time there is a disagreement, it can cause further division, right? And so in order for you to begin to shift that narrative, you have to shift how you see the things that happen in your marriage. And so this calls for surrender. And so when it comes to surrender, when it comes to the differences in the marriage, you are basically saying, listen, I'm surrendering my need to be right. I am surrendering my need to win. I am surrendering the things that could cause further division because I'm surrendering them so that I could find the strategy and the get the instructions on how to make these differences work together. Okay. And so again, when we see differences, if we don't understand how to operate from a posture of surrender instead of a posture of trying to prove that what I believe is right, the way that I'm doing it is right, but surrendering those differences for the mission and the mandate of the marriage. And so surrendering that in a way that you learn how to work together, bring those things together. So it's kind of like the pieces of a puzzle, right? We have the pieces of a puzzle and they look a mess when they're just all over the place, right? But as you begin to put each piece together, you see how they rightly fit into each slot to perform this huge picture. But if you don't put them in the right spot, or if you don't even try to put them together, it's just going to look like a big mess that deserves to be put in the trash. And so that is why it's important for you to learn the art of surrender so that number one, when it comes to not understanding how things work together, there are always instructions, right? So for example, if you were to get a piece of furniture from IKEA, you're not going to go to Walmart and ask Walmart how to put together this piece of furniture that you bought from IKEA. You're going to go to the original manufacturer, which is from IKEA. So this is in essence to the same way you would approach when your husband is acting, like you don't know what's wrong with him. And you're like, you know what, God, this man you gave me, you can kind of keep him, you can get him back. And you asking God if you can do a recall on that prayer. Right. And so, but what you're doing is you're saying, instead of me just discarding this, instead of me just throwing it away, instead of me fighting for my needs to be right, I'm going to surrender by seeking the instructions from God on how I need to move and handle and navigate this difference that we are experiencing. See, when you get out of yourself and you no longer feel like, and you're no longer in the mindset where you're wanting to point the finger, you're wanting to be seen, as the innocent one or any of those things. When you move out of that position, you give God free reign and full control to do the necessary transformation in your marriage. Right. And so when you're having those difficulties or those conflict challenges in your marriage, you're saying, you know what, God, what I really want to do is I want to let him have it. What I really want to do is let it rip. What I really want to do is pop off. What I really want to do is put him in his place, let him know I'm not the one to be played with, right? But what you're saying is, I'm not going to handle this the way that I normally would handle it. Instead of me going at this with my own skills, education, and knowledge, what I'm going to do is I'm going to surrender this to God. I'm going to pause. Put this in the comment. I'm going to pause. I'm going to pray. And then I'm going to proceed with the instructions that God has given me. But see, when your emotions are in control, when your emotions are in charge, you're not going to want to pause, pray, and then proceed. You're going to proceed, and then you're going to pray. Where you're going to proceed, then you're going to pause a little bit and say, man, why did I do that? I shouldn't have said that. I probably should have I probably went a little bit overboard, right? And then, and then you're going to pray because you're going to need God to fix it. But surrender looks like, no, I'm going to pause first, then I'm going to pray, and then I'm going to proceed. Why? Because I understand that when I go to the manufacturer, they have a deeper level of understanding than I could ever have, right? He knows my husband way better than I did. Because why? Because he's the one who created him. So he knows that even though when I'm looking at this, I'm thinking that he's being inconsiderate. I may be thinking that, he's being unsupportive. I may be feeling like he doesn't really understand where I'm coming from. But because I'm going to the manufacturer is going to tell me, no, what he's doing right now is there's an internal conflict going on. He doesn't really know how to respond. So he's responding from his 10-year-old self and not his 40-year-old self. Right. And so here's what I need you to do. Instead of you popping off, I need you to go and I need you to approach it this way. So instead of you popping off, I need you to go and say, listen, I want to understand where you're coming from. I want to understand, what's going on right now, because this is not your normal behavior. Or, and so now you're able to open up dialogue, have a conversation, and then really work together to get to resolution, right? That's what surrender looks like. Surrender looks like, surrender looks like, you know what? Instead of me doing things the way that I used to do it, or the way that I would normally do it if this situation were to arise, instead of me doing it that way, I'm going to pause, I'm going to pray, and then I'm going to proceed. I'm going to pause and say, you know what, God, this is how I normally would address this, right? I would normally probably storm up out of here. I would normally probably just, go take me a drive. But God, I want to hear what you have to say about how I need to approach this, right? And so that's what surrender looks like. Surrender looks like, I want to focus on what is necessary for us to get resolved. I want to focus on what is necessary for us to stop going in this cycle, stop going, doing the same hurdle, this same obstacle. We can't seem to get around this mountain or over this mountain. We just keep going around and around and around. And so surrender says, you know what, there must be a different way, right? Surrender says that I'm going to shift from operating as a strong woman to a woman of strength. There's a difference. See, a strong woman operates in her emotions. A strong woman operates off of her own wisdom. A strong woman is always in survival mode, trying to protect herself from pain. But a woman of strength operates and moves in wisdom. A woman of strength is going to seek God before she makes any decision. A woman of strength is going to operate in humility. A woman of strength is not going to just do what she thinks is best, but she is going to surrender to whatever the process is, whatever the strategy is, whatever the instructions are of God, because she knows that when she does that, she is going to get the desires of her heart. Why? Because surrender means I am positioning myself so that I can delight myself in God, and then he's going to guide me. Then he's going to give me the desires of my heart. And so that's what surrender looks like in a marriage. This is how you get supernatural strategy. This is how you get supernatural results, when you pray instead of popping off. Yeah, when you pray instead of popping off. Okay. When you listen, not to respond, but you listen because you want to understand what's going on beyond the emotions, beyond the words that are actually being said, but what is really going on. Surrender says, you know what? I understand that what's going on. Although I feel like it's personal, I understand that the attack is not against me personally, but the attack is the enemy trying to destroy what God has put together. That's what surrender looks like. Okay. But when you don't understand that, you continue to go head to head. You continue to find yourself in these constant conflicts. You can continue to have these blow-ups that cause more division. And you don't see the blow-up as an opportunity to build. You see the blow-up as something that is breaking down, that is tearing apart. And so even when I'm coaching my clients through conflicts that they are having in their marriage, one of the things that I always say to them, I said, I need you to change your perspective. I need you to see this blow up, right? Not as a breakdown, but a blueprint for you to actually build the type of marriage that you truly desire to have. That is what I need you to see this blow up as. Because if you see this blow up as a breakdown, you will stay in a broken state. But if you see this as a blueprint to build the type of marriage that you have, you'll take the pieces that have been shattered and you'll be able to rebuild it to something that is more beautiful, right? So this again is what surrender looks like, because surrender looks for the way to build better. Surrender says, you know what? This did blow up. This does seem like something is broken here. However, why did this happen? This is an indication that there were some things that were not built on the right foundation. There were some things that were not properly structured from the very beginning. And so now that we know this is our opportunity to build something better, to build something greater. All right. But that's all I have for y'all. I have to run. I have an appointment at 4:00. I'm already running just a tad bit behind, but I wanted to make sure I kept my word to come on, within the 3:00 hour to wrap up this series. Listen, if this has been good for you, if you have taken something from this, I want you to make sure that you share this with someone else. Slide it into their DM, share it on their page, send them a text message, whatever it is you have to do so that they can benefit from this message as well. But I love you guys immensely and intensely, and I will talk to you all again soon. Thank you, Roderick. Thank you, Love More. Thank you guys over here on my Instagram family as well. And I will talk to you all again soon, okay? Love you.